Comprehensive Analysis and Explanation of Annabelle, 2014. Annabelle, 2014, serves as a foundational, albeit critically divisive, cornerstone in the modern horror landscape. This analysis provides a complete examination of the film, beginning with its position as a spin-off and prequel to the highly successful The Conjuring, 2013. The movie's primary ambition was to expand what would become a sprawling cinematic universe by exploring the terrifying origin story of the now iconic possessed doll. It achieved staggering commercial success, grossing over $257 million worldwide against a modest budget of $6.5 million, a testament to the potent draw of its premise. However, its reception was sharply bifurcated. While it terrified audiences at the box office, it garnered largely negative reviews from critics who found it a pale imitation of its superior predecessor. The narrative of Annabelle, 2014, is set in motion in 1970, introducing the young married couple Mia and John Form, who are expectant parents. John's gift of a rare vintage porcelain doll to add to Mia's collection sets a seemingly innocent stage. The idyllic domestic life is violently shattered by a home invasion perpetrated by members of a satanic cult, including a woman named Annabelle Higgins. Her ritualistic suicide while clutching the doll, and the subsequent mysterious absorption of her blood by the porcelain, acts as the film's catalytic event, transforming the object into a conduit for a demonic entity. This opening sequence is widely regarded as one of the film's most effective, masterfully establishing a tone of brutal, realistic terror before pivoting to the supernatural. Following the trauma, the family, now with their newborn daughter Leah, relocates to a Pasadena apartment in hopes of a fresh start. The film then firmly enters classic haunted territory as the doll, inexplicably, reappears among their belongings. The paranormal activity escalates in predictable but often effectively staged ways, targeting Mia with a particular focus on her infant. The plot mechanics involve Mia's investigation, aided by the kindly bookstore owner Evelyn and their parish priest, Father Perez, who provides the essential exposition. He reveals the demon's goal is to claim a human soul, specifically Mia's, using the doll as an anchor and her child as leverage. The thematic core of Annabelle, 2014, attempts to grapple with several classic horror concepts. Primarily, it explores the nature of evil as an invasive, parasitic force that can latch onto objects, a concept directly imported from the lore of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The doll itself is not inherently evil, but becomes a focal point, a vessel. The film also delves into themes of sacrifice and atonement, most poignantly through the character of Evelyn. Her arc, rooted in guilt over the loss of her own daughter, provides the film's emotional backbone and culminates in its most significant thematic moment. A sacrificial act of love where she offers her soul to the demon in exchange for Mia's, framing her death as both heroic and a form of long-sought redemption. A prominent thematic undercurrent is the exploration of maternal anxiety and isolation. Mia, often alone in the apartment while John is at work as a doctor, embodies the vulnerable new mother whose fears are initially rationalized and dismissed. The demon's fixation on her baby amplifies this primal fear, creating a clear, if somewhat superficial, parallel to horror touchstones like Rosemary's Baby. However, a critical consensus suggests this rich theme is underexploited, favoring cheap scares over deeper psychological horror that could have elevated the entire narrative. The cinematic execution of Annabelle, 2014, directed by cinematographer John R. Leonetti, is a focal point of critique. The visual style is proficient but largely unadventurous, relying heavily on a predictable horror toolkit of quiet, loud jump scares and slow pan reveals. While sporadically effective, this approach was widely criticized as grating and unoriginal. Notably, the doll is used as a static, unsettling presence rather than an animated antagonist like Chucky, a choice that adds to its creepy authenticity, but also places greater burden on the surrounding atmosphere and events to generate fear. Within its conventional framework, the film does contain standout sequences that demonstrate a higher caliber of tension building. The opening home invasion is one. Another is a masterfully edited scene involving a malfunctioning elevator in a basement laundry room. This sequence, with its claustrophobic setting and clever use of suspense, is often highlighted as a peak moment that showcases the controlled craftsmanship the rest of the film frequently lacks. These moments prove the film is capable of more than the routine scares that dominate its runtime. A significant critical charge against Annabelle, 2014, is its derivative nature. The film bears stark structural and aesthetic similarities to James Wan's previous works, Insidious and The Conjuring, without matching their inventiveness. The blueprint, a family traumatized by an initial event, a move to a new home that fails to stop the haunting, a semi-absent husband, and the eventual consultation of spiritual experts, feels like a direct copy, leading to accusations of the film being a formulaic, less imaginative shadow of its inspirations. This lack of originality is central to its negative critical reception. The critical and audience reception for Annabelle, 2014, illustrates a stark divide in modern horror consumption. Critically, it was panned, holding a 28% score on Rotten Tomatoes with a consensus that it borrows unabashedly from better horror films and relies on cheap jolts. Major criticisms focused on the weak characterization of Mia and John, who are often described as bland and unengaging, making emotional investment difficult. The script was deemed a by-the-numbers template that failed to develop its more intriguing ideas about cults, faith, or the period's societal anxieties. Despite the critical drubbing, the film was a resounding commercial triumph. Its opening weekend gross of $37.1 million set a record for a horror film in 2014. This box office performance demonstrates the powerful draw of the burgeoning Conjuring brand and the effective, broad appeal of its core scare mechanics. Audience reactions were and remain more mixed than critical ones, with a segment of horror fans appreciating its straightforward, unpretentious approach and effective jump scares, while others align with the critics' assessments of its flaws and missed opportunities. A minority critical defense of the film does exist, with some appraisals arguing that Annabelle, 2014, functions as a strong, bare-bones franchise entry that effectively builds tension and delivers legitimate scares. These defenses often acknowledge the film's flaws, particularly in its ending and character development, but position it as a competent, if unexceptional, studio horror product that succeeds in its primary goal: to frighten a mainstream audience. The legacy and franchise role of Annabelle, 2014, is where its importance is cemented. The film proved the economic model for the Conjuring Universe, demonstrating that lower-budget spin-offs focusing on specific artifacts could yield astronomical returns. This success greenlit the expansive universe that followed. It directly launched its own successful subseries, with the 2017 prequel Annabelle, creation serving as a significant course correction, earning critical praise for being more terrifying and inventive. Furthermore, it established a template for artifact-based stories within the universe, focusing on cursed objects and the ordinary families they besieged. In conclusion, Annabelle, 2014, is a fascinating case study in modern studio horror. As a standalone film, it is a competently made but largely derivative and unmemorable haunted house story, hampered by thin characterizations and a reliance on repetitive, predictable scare tactics. It fails to reach the atmospheric depth or emotional resonance of The Conjuring or the clever plotting of Insidious. However, as a commercial product and a franchise catalyst, it is an undeniable and pivotal success. It effectively tapped into a potent cultural fear, the corrupted innocence of a child's toy, and bolstered by its chilling doll design, delivered enough visceral jolts to captivate a global audience. Its dual legacy is thus secure. As a movie, it is often regarded as the weakest link in its own trilogy, but as a strategic brand expansion, it was a masterstroke that unlocked a lucrative new realm of supernatural storytelling. Annabelle, 2014, establishes itself as a foundational, yet critically polarizing, entry within the contemporary horror genre. This analysis offers a thorough exploration, recognizing its genesis as a direct spin-off and narrative precursor to the immensely popular The Conjuring, 2013. The film's core ambition was to strategically broaden an emerging cinematic universe by delving into the sinister origin of a now iconic haunted doll. Its commercial performance was nothing short of phenomenal, amassing over $257 million globally against a mere $6.5 million budget, unequivocally proving the market strength of its chilling premise. A stark dichotomy defined its reception, however, with massive audience turnout starkly contrasting the largely negative critiques from reviewers who deemed it an inferior derivative. The narrative framework of Annabelle, 2014, commences in the year 1970, presenting viewers with the expectant parents Mia and John form. John's acquisition of a rare vintage porcelain doll, intended to complement his wife's existing collection, sets a deceptively tranquil domestic scene. This tranquility is brutally dismantled during a harrowing home invasion executed by adherents of a satanic cult. The pivotal moment arrives as a cultist named Annabelle Higgins commits suicide while clutching the doll, an act that mysteriously causes the porcelain to absorb her blood. This ritualistic event effectively transforms the inanimate toy into a dedicated conduit for a malicious demonic presence, providing the film's supernatural catalyst. In the aftermath of this trauma, the family, now including their newborn daughter Leah, seeks solace by relocating to a Pasadena apartment. The narrative swiftly adopts the familiar tropes of a haunting narrative when the doll, previously discarded, inexplicably materializes among their possessions. A progressive escalation of paranormal phenomena ensues, specifically targeting Mia while using her infant child as a focal point of torment. The plot advances through Mia's own investigation, supported by the empathetic bookstore owner Evelyn and their local priest, Father Perez. His doctrinal exposition clarifies the demon's ultimate objective: the procurement of a human soul, with Mia identified as the specific target and her daughter serving as critical leverage. Thematic aspirations within Annabelle, 2014, engage with several enduring horror motifs. A central concept explores the parasitic nature of evil, depicting it as a force capable of inhabiting mundane objects, a principle directly sourced from the established mythology of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The doll therefore operates not as the source of evil, but as a potent vessel and focal point. Sacrifice and atonement emerge as the film's most resonant themes, largely embodied in the character arc of Evelyn. Her profound guilt stemming from a personal tragedy lends her character a poignant depth that the central couple often lacks, culminating in a decisive act of sacrificial love that resolves the central conflict. Maternal fear and profound isolation constitute a potent undercurrent throughout the film's runtime. Mia, frequently depicted alone in her new apartment while her husband John attends to his medical practice, personifies the vulnerable new mother whose escalating terrors are initially met with rational dismissal. The demonic entity's relentless focus on her baby intensifies this primal anxiety, creating a clear narrative parallel to iconic horror works like Rosemary's Baby. Many critical assessments argue, however, that this psychologically rich territory remains underexplored, with the film opting for superficial scare tactics over a more nuanced and chilling exploration of postpartum vulnerability. Cinematic direction under John R. Leonetti results in a visually competent but largely uninspired product. The film's aesthetic relies extensively on a well-worn horror formula characterized by predictable jump scares and slow reveals. This methodology yields sporadic effectiveness, but was broadly critiqued as a repetitive and unoriginal approach to building dread. An intentional creative choice sees the doll itself remain largely static, its menace derived from its unsettling presence and the events it orchestrates rather than any physical animation, distinguishing it from more active antagonists in the genre. Notable sequences within the film demonstrate a capacity for elevated tension that the broader work struggles to maintain. The brutally realistic home invasion that opens the story is widely praised for its visceral impact. Another standout involves a meticulously crafted scene in a basement laundry room featuring a malfunctioning elevator, a moment of genuine suspense that showcases clever editing and a masterful control of claustrophobic atmosphere. These segments highlight the film's potential for quality that is not consistently sustained across its full narrative. A persistent critique leveled at Annabelle, 2014, concerns its overtly derivative structure. The plot architecture bears a conspicuous resemblance to James Wan's earlier successes, Insidious and The Conjuring. The familiar beats, an initial traumatic event, a futile relocation, a professionally distracted spouse, and eventual paranormal intervention, feel meticulously replicated without a comparable degree of narrative innovation or atmospheric depth. This lack of creative distinction positioned the film as a perfunctory imitation in the eyes of many reviewers, significantly dampening its critical appeal. Final Consideration positions the film as a compelling study in modern horror production. As a singular cinematic work, it stands as a proficient yet derivative and forgettable addition to the haunted house subgenre, limited by shallow characterization and repetitive tactics. It fails to capture the masterful atmosphere or emotional weight of its superior predecessor. As a strategic commercial entity, however, its success is undeniable and transformative. By exploiting a universal unease around corrupted innocence and coupling it with a memorably creepy design, the film achieved its primary goal of widespread fright and financial profit, securing its pivotal, if artistically modest, place in horror film history. Annabelle, 2014, carves its distinct, if controversial, space as a cornerstone film within contemporary horror cinema. This detailed examination explores its dual identity as both a commercial powerhouse and a critically maligned narrative. Positioned as a direct narrative prequel expanding the universe introduced in The Conjuring, 2013, the film's primary objective was to provide a terrifying origin for an already infamous inanimate object. Its financial triumph, earning over $257 million worldwide from a minuscule budget, stands in stark contrast to the scathing reviews from professional critics who dismissed it as a creatively bankrupt imitation. The story meticulously unfolds in 1970, introducing us to the seemingly blissful lives of Mia and John Form, a young couple anticipating their first child. A seemingly thoughtful gift from John, a rare, vintage porcelain doll, becomes the unwitting centerpiece of their impending nightmare. Their suburban peace is violently ruptured by a cult invasion, a sequence that masterfully blends real-world terror with supernatural dread. The specific act of a cultist named Annabelle Higgins taking her own life while holding the doll serves as the dark ritual that bridges two realms, corrupting the toy with a malevolent spiritual force. Seeking refuge from psychological trauma, the family relocates to a new apartment in Pasadena, a classic geographical shift in horror that never truly offers escape. The doll's mysterious reappearance among their packed belongings signals the beginning of a more insidious, domestically centered haunting. Paranormal events escalate with a deliberate pace, focusing their energy almost exclusively on the recovering mother, Mia, while using her vulnerable infant daughter as a tool for psychic torment. The plot's progression hinges on a growing investigation led by Mia, reluctantly aided by her logically minded husband and later supported by two key allies from outside the family unit. Father Perez, the family's local priest, provides the necessary theological framework for the unfolding terror, explaining the demon's need for a human soul and its use of the doll as a tangible anchor in the physical world. This exposition solidifies the film's adherence to the established lore of its cinematic universe, rooting its horror in a specific belief system. The narrative cleverly, if not subtly, uses his character to transition the threat from a general haunting to a targeted spiritual siege with Mia's soul as the ultimate prize, raising the stakes beyond mere physical survival. Evelyn, the kindly bookstore owner, emerges as the film's most emotionally compelling character, her own history of profound loss creating a resonant parallel to Mia's current plight. Her involvement transcends that of a mere helper. She represents a thematic counterpart, a woman forever scarred by tragedy who finds a path to redemption through direct confrontation with the same force threatening the forms. This subplot introduces the film's core theme of sacrificial love, providing a moral and emotional weight that the central haunting sometimes lacks. The demonic entity's modus operandi is psychologically astute, exploiting Mia's postpartum vulnerability and the isolating architecture of their new apartment building. Its manifestations are rarely gratuitous. Instead, they are calculated to erode her sanity, distance her from her husband, and position her as an unreliable narrator in her own home. This tactic of targeted psychological warfare, focusing on a new mother's deepest fears, taps into a universal anxiety that gives the supernatural events a disturbing layer of plausibility. Cinematographically, the film employs a polished, period-specific aesthetic, utilizing warm, domestic colors in its daytime scenes that gradually give way to cooler, more oppressive shadows as the haunting intensifies. Director John R. Leonetti's background as a cinematographer is evident in the careful composition of frames, often using doorways, shadows, and the doll's stationary placement to create a sense of constant, unseen observation. The visual style, while not groundbreaking, effectively crafts a world that feels both nostalgically real and perpetually on the brink of supernatural intrusion. The film's sound design deserves particular recognition for being a primary engine of its suspense. Rather than relying solely on explosive musical stings, it utilizes unsettling ambient noise. The faint scratch of porcelain, the distant cry of a baby that may not be there, the unnatural silence of a suddenly still apartment. This auditory landscape keeps the audience in a state of heightened alert, mirroring Mia's own deteriorating sense of security and making the eventual jump scares feel earned within the constructed environment. A significant point of contention lies in the characterization of the central couple. John Form, written as a dedicated doctor, often falls into the trope of the skeptically absent husband, his profession conveniently requiring long hours away from home. While this serves the plot's need to isolate Mia, it prevents the development of a more dynamic partnership in crisis. Mia herself, though performed with committed distress by Annabelle Wallis, is given limited dimensions beyond her roles as victim, mother, and investigator, a missed opportunity for deeper psychological exploration. The film's third-act confrontation shifts the action to a climactic sequence within the confines of the apartment building's basement and elevator shaft. This setting change amplifies the claustrophobia and introduces elements of physical danger alongside the spiritual threat. The resolution, pivoting on Evelyn's tragic yet purposeful sacrifice, provides a thematically coherent conclusion that ties together the movie's ideas about guilt, love, and the cost of salvation. It argues that true evil can only be countered by a willing, selfless act, a notion that lends the ending a somber gravity. Critical reception was overwhelmingly negative, with many reviews criticizing the film's over-reliance on predictable genre tropes and its failure to innovate upon the template established by its superior predecessors. The screenplay was frequently cited as a weak link, with dialogue serving exposition more than character development and plot mechanics feeling recycled. This derivative quality placed the film in an unenviable position of constant comparison, where its similarities only highlighted its deficiencies in originality and narrative depth. However, the audience response told a markedly different story. The film's record-breaking opening weekend demonstrated a powerful disconnect between critical opinion and mainstream viewer appetite. For a significant portion of the audience, the familiar tropes were not a bug, but a feature, a comfortable, reliable framework for delivering a series of effective scares. The potent iconography of the doll itself, coupled with a straightforward, easily digestible plot, proved to be a highly marketable and enjoyable product for a global horror fanbase seeking visceral thrills. The film's cultural context is also worthy of examination. Set in 1970, it subtly evokes the lingering societal anxieties of the late 1960s, a period marked by social upheaval and the terrifying rise of cults like the Manson family. The opening home invasion by a satanic cult taps directly into this very real, contemporary fear, grounding the supernatural premise in a tangible historical trauma. This setting provides a richer subtext than is often acknowledged, suggesting a world where the boundaries between human and demonic evil have become dangerously blurred. Annabelle's design as a horror icon is a masterstroke in minimalist menace. Unlike animated dolls, its power lies in its absolute stillness and unblinking gaze. The filmmakers understand that the audience's imagination is far more terrifying than any mechanical movement. The horror derives from where it appears, the context of its presence, and the psychological weight projected onto its china-faced features. This design choice ensures the doll's unsettling effectiveness transcends the film itself, becoming a lasting image in popular culture. The performance of Alfre Woodard as Evelyn stands out as the film's most authentic emotional anchor. She conveys a lifetime of sorrow and quiet resilience with remarkable economy, making her character's arc feel profoundly tragic and heroically inevitable. Her scenes provide the human stakes that the paranormal plot requires to resonate beyond mere spectacle. In many ways, the film belongs more to Evelyn's journey of atonement than to Mia's struggle for survival, creating a compelling, if unconventional, narrative center. The thematic exploration of objects and memory is a fascinating, if underdeveloped, layer. The doll begins as a symbol of a happy memory, a gift for a collection, before being violently transformed into a repository for a traumatic event and a malevolent spirit. It explores the idea that objects can become haunted not just by ghosts, but by the emotional energy of the violence and pain they witness, acting as psychic batteries for darkness. This gives the horror a melancholic philosophical edge, suggesting that evil can stain not just people, but the very artifacts surrounding them. From a franchise perspective, the film's ending is its most crucial scene. The coda, which directly links the story to the opening of The Conjuring by showing the doll being purchased for the Warrens' Occult Museum, is a masterful piece of universe building. It transforms the film from a standalone prequel into an essential chapter in a larger saga, giving the contained story of the forms a lasting consequence that echoes through subsequent films. This narrative stitch effectively validates the film's existence within a broader mythology. The film's legacy is ultimately bifurcated. On one hand, it is remembered as a creatively timid outlier in the Conjuring Universe, often cited as the weakest narrative entry. On the other, it is hailed as a revolutionary commercial proof of concept that demonstrated the immense profitability of shared horror universes built around iconic artifacts. Its success paved the way for not only its own superior sequels, but also for other spin-offs like The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona, effectively blueprinting a business model that dominates a sector of modern horror. In analyzing its scare techniques, one finds a mixture of effective craftsmanship and frustrating redundancy. The film understands the power of anticipation, often holding shots on empty doorways or static dolls to build dread. However, its overuse of the cat scare, a false jump scare followed immediately by a real one, and loud audio cues becomes a predictable crutch, numbing the audience rather than unsettling them on a deeper, more enduring level. This places the film firmly in the category of haunted house ride cinema, designed for immediate reaction rather than lingering fear. The portrayal of faith and the church within the narrative is pragmatic rather than deeply theological. Father Perez is a sympathetic but ultimately ineffective figure, his religious tools offering diagnosis but not solution. The film posits that institutional religion can identify evil but requires a more personal, sacrificial form of spiritual intervention to defeat it. This perspective allows the horror to exist in a world with recognized spiritual rules without granting traditional religious symbols an overwhelming power, maintaining the demon's threat level. Mia's transformation from victim to active protagonist follows a conventional but satisfying arc. Her initial terror gradually hardens into a determined resolve to protect her child at all costs. This maternal ferocity becomes her key weapon, setting the stage for the final confrontation where her love for her daughter directly conflicts with the demon's hunger for her soul. While her character development may be straightforward, it roots the supernatural conflict in a universally relatable human instinct, providing a solid emotional core for the escalating horror. The film's pacing demonstrates a clear understanding of genre rhythm, moving between quiet, character-focused scenes of growing unease and intense set-piece scares. This ebb and flow prevents audience fatigue and allows tension to rebuild systematically. The middle section, dedicated to the slow infestation of the new apartment, is particularly effective in establishing a sense of inescapable dread, showing how the evil permeates every aspect of domestic life, from the nursery to the sewing room. Annabelle's influence on the horror genre extends beyond its franchise. Its success proved the viability of period-set, supernatural horror focused on a single, simple antagonist concept. It reinforced the commercial appeal of PG-13 horror that suggests rather than explicitly shows violence, relying on atmosphere and implication to generate fear for a wider audience demographic. In this sense, it became a template for a certain kind of mainstream, accessible, and highly profitable studio horror film. The psychological dimension of the haunting often manifests through the distortion of domestic tranquility. A peaceful rocking chair moves on its own. A previously comforting baby mobile becomes a sinister trigger. The act of sewing, a symbol of homemaking, is perverted into a mechanism of threat. This corruption of the ordinary is the film's most potent horror tool, suggesting that no space, no object, and no routine is safe from the invasive influence of the attached demonic presence. Critiques of the film's logical consistency often point to character decisions, particularly John's initial dismissal of Mia's escalating fears. While this serves a narrative purpose, it sometimes strains credibility, relying on character obliviousness to extend the plot. However, one can also read this as a reflection of the era's gender dynamics and a common horror trope where disbelief itself becomes a weapon that empowers the haunting, isolating the true believer and allowing the evil to grow unchallenged. The score by Joseph Bishara, a veteran of The Conjuring and Insidious, provides a connective auditory tissue to the wider universe. His composition utilizes atonal strings, deep drones, and sudden, piercing notes to create a soundscape of pervasive unease. The music works in concert with the sound design to neurologically prime the audience for fright, its familiar style acting as an audio signature for the brand of meticulously crafted, composer-driven horror that defines this cinematic universe. The film's production design meticulously recreates the early 1970s, not with overt nostalgia, but with a subdued authenticity. The color palettes, furnishings, and costumes create a believable world that feels both familiar and slightly distant, a crucial element for period horror. This grounded setting makes the intrusion of the supernatural feel more violent and disruptive, as it invades not a Gothic mansion, but a relatable, everyday suburban environment. Annabelle's status as a prequel presents a unique narrative challenge. The audience knows the doll's ultimate destination. The film's tension, therefore, cannot derive from whether the doll is truly haunted, but from the cost its haunting extracts from the people it encounters before reaching the Warrens. This shifts the dramatic question from what will happen to how much will be lost along the way, a reframing that the film navigates with varying degrees of success throughout its runtime. The demon's lack of a defined personality or goal beyond soul acquisition is both a weakness and a strength. It weakens the narrative by providing a vague, monolithic antagonist. However, it also strengthens the horror by presenting evil as an impersonal, mechanistic force, a spiritual parasite following its base programming. This makes it more relentless and less negotiable, a force of nature rather than a character with motives, which can be inherently more frightening in its indifference. The film's treatment of the cult is notably brief, using it solely as an inciting incident rather than an ongoing element. This choice focuses the story entirely on the domestic aftermath of a supernatural act, divorcing the horror from its human practitioners and placing it squarely within the family home. It suggests that the true danger begins after the ritual ends, and that the summoned evil, once unleashed, operates with a will and purpose independent of its original summoners. Mia's research into the doll's history serves as an effective infodump mechanism, but also illustrates her proactive shift in character. Her visits to the library and antique stores show her attempting to arm herself with knowledge, transitioning from a passive victim to an investigator. This process of discovery allows the film to parcel out exposition naturally while charting her growing comprehension of the scale of the threat she faces, raising the stakes with each new piece of historical or occult information she uncovers. The visual motif of blood and porcelain is central to the film's iconography. The stark contrast between the pristine, white ceramic and the vivid, soaking red blood in the opening ritual creates a powerful and lasting image. This juxtaposition of innocence and corruption, cleanliness and visceral stain, perfectly encapsulates the film's core theme: the violation of something meant to be pure and childlike by an ancient, predatory evil. John's character arc, while limited, follows a path from skeptical provider to desperate believer. His turning point often arrives later than the audience's, a narrative delay designed to maximize Mia's isolation. When he finally fully accepts the supernatural reality, his medical background ironically becomes an asset, allowing him to analyze the threat with a clinical detachment that contrasts with Mia's emotional involvement, though the script underutilizes this potential dynamic. The apartment building setting functions as a classic horror microcosm. It is a place of many homes, yet profoundly isolating. Help is ostensibly just through a wall, yet entirely out of reach. The neighbors are largely absent or unaware, making the building feel both populated and eerily empty. This environment masterfully translates the experience of urban alienation into a supernatural context, where the noise of other lives masks the sounds of an unfolding private nightmare. Evelyn's backstory, revealed through subtle performance and key dialogue, accomplishes significant emotional world-building in a short time. Her loss explains her immediate empathy for Mia and foreshadows her ultimate sacrifice. It establishes a thematic lineage of maternal grief and protection that connects her tragedy to the form's current crisis, suggesting a cyclical battle against a force that preys specifically on the bonds of family and the trauma of loss. The film's editing patterns are crucial to its scare economy. Rapid cuts are used sparingly, reserved for moments of extreme violence or revelation. More often, the editor employs prolonged takes that force the audience to sit with an unsettling image, like the doll simply sitting in a chair, building anxiety through duration rather than freneticism. This patience demonstrates a confidence in the central creepy image that pays off in the film's more restrained, and therefore more effective moments. The concept of a conduit, as explained by Father Perez, is the film's key piece of mythos. It rationalizes the haunting by providing a set of rules. The demon needs an object to focus its power and a human soul to claim. This rule-bound approach to the supernatural gives the narrative a puzzle-like structure, where the characters must understand and break the demon's connection to the conduit to survive. It moves the plot beyond random occurrences into a defined, if deadly, supernatural contest. Annabelle's impact on the toy industry and popular culture was ironic and immediate. The film transformed vintage porcelain Annabelle dolls from collectibles into objects of morbid fascination, highlighting horror's power to recontextualize everyday items. It sparked discussions about the eeriness of dolls in general, tapping into a pre-existing cultural unease and amplifying it through mainstream cinema, demonstrating the genre's ability to weaponize common phobias. The film's lighting strategy often employs practical sources within the scene, lamps, television glow, refrigerator lights, to create pools of illumination amidst deep shadows. This technique grounds the horror in a realistic visual framework, making the darkness surrounding the light sources feel alive with potential threat. It avoids the overly stylized, expressionistic lighting of some Gothic horror, instead crafting a look where the supernatural feels like it could be hiding in the very next unlit corner of a normal room. The relationship between Mia and Evelyn evolves into the film's most meaningful human connection. It is not a friendship of convenience, but a profound bond forged in shared vulnerability and understanding. Evelyn sees in Mia the daughter she lost and the mother she failed to protect, while Mia finds in Evelyn the belief and guidance her husband cannot initially provide. This relationship provides the emotional infrastructure for the sacrificial climax, making it feel tragic but necessary, rather than merely shocking. The use of children's imagery, the doll, the nursery, the mobile, the rocking horse, is systematically corrupted throughout the film. Each symbol of innocence and childhood safety is turned against the family, making the home itself feel like a traitorous space. This methodical perversion attacks the very concept of sanctuary, suggesting that the demon's power lies in its ability to twist love and protection into vectors for fear and despair, a deeply unsettling proposition for any parent. From a screenwriting perspective, the film is a model of economical, premise-driven construction. Every scene serves the dual purpose of advancing the plot and escalating the scare sequence. There is little narrative fat or extraneous character development. The story moves with a direct, linear purpose from inciting incident to climactic confrontation. This lean approach can feel mechanical, but it also ensures a consistent pace and a clear, undiluted focus on its core horror premise. The film's marketing campaign was instrumental in its success, centering entirely on the chilling image of the doll. Trailers and posters offered minimal plot, maximizing instead on the simple, potent idea of a haunted doll. This marketing savvy proved that a strong, iconic visual concept could drive audience interest more effectively than complex plotting, a lesson that would define the promotional strategies for many subsequent films in the universe. Annabelle's philosophical underpinnings are inherently pessimistic about the nature of evil. It presents evil as a pre-existing, opportunistic force that requires only a crack, a moment of violence, a spill of blood, to infiltrate the human world. It is not created by human failings but exploits them. This view contrasts with horror that roots evil in human psychology, instead offering a more traditional, almost medieval vision of a universe populated by active, predatory spiritual entities. The costume design subtly reinforces character and period. Mia's clothing evolves from cheerful, late 60s prints early in the film to more subdued, practical, and often disheveled attire as the haunting progresses, visually charting her psychological descent. John's consistent suits and Evelyn's modest, timeless sweaters and skirts help define their characters quickly and efficiently, using wardrobe as a silent but effective tool for storytelling. The film's final shot of the doll, seated peacefully on a shelf in the Warrens' artifact room, is a masterful punctuation mark. It signals a temporary containment, but not a destruction of the evil. The doll's serene expression in this new context is more frightening than any grimace, as it promises future stories and future victims. This ending perfectly captures the essence of the franchise, the locking away of horrors that are never truly defeated, only catalogued and waiting. In the broader taxonomy of haunted doll films, Annabelle distinguishes itself by prioritizing atmosphere and suggestion over physical comedy or slasher-style antics. It aligns more with the tradition of films like Magic or Dead of Night than with the Child's Play series, seeking to unsettle rather than entertain with carnage. This choice places it in a more respectable subgenre of psychological supernatural horror, aiming for dread over gore. The director's commentary and available interviews reveal a production focused on craft and reverence for the source mythology. Leonetti approached the film as a sincere exercise in building a terrifying, rules-based world, not as a cynical cash grab. This earnestness is felt in the film's meticulous technical execution, even when the narrative inspiration falters. It is the work of skilled craftsmen faithfully following a proven blueprint, resulting in a product that is professionally polished if not artistically daring. Ultimately, Annabelle, 2014, succeeds most unequivocally as a catalyst. It catalyzed a multi-film franchise, catalyzed a business model for shared horror universes, and catalyzed the elevation of a prop into a global horror icon. Its cinematic merits are debatable and hotly contested, but its impact on the landscape of 21st-century studio horror is undeniable and profound. The film stands as a testament to the power of a simple, creepy idea, expertly marketed and delivered with enough technical skill to captivate millions, securing its permanent, if complex, place in horror history. Annabelle, 2014, presents a fascinating paradox as a pivotal, yet artistically contentious, artifact within modern cinematic horror. This in-depth exploration situates it as both a highly lucrative commercial venture and a creatively cautious narrative endeavor. Its foundational role stems from a deliberate strategy to mine the burgeoning mythology established by The Conjuring, focusing on a single enigmatic object to build audience anticipation. The staggering fiscal return, generating over 40 times its initial investment, showcased the potent market viability of interconnected supernatural tales, even as critical voices dismissed its narrative as a hollow, formulaic exercise. The plot constructs its reality upon a bedrock of domestic tranquility shattered by archaic evil. We are introduced to Mia and John Form during a period of hopeful anticipation, their lives a tableau of 1970s suburban normalcy. This carefully established piece becomes the essential canvas upon which the film's horrors will violently intrude, making the subsequent violation of their home feel profoundly personal. The gift of the vintage doll operates as a beautifully wrapped harbinger, its initial reception as a cherished collectible tragically ironic given its destined role as a spiritual prison for a malicious entity. A brutal home invasion sequence masterfully shifts the genre's gears from potential thriller to outright supernatural horror. The attack by deluded cultists is filmed with a visceral, chaotic realism that grounds the terror in human violence. The critical moment of transfiguration occurs not with a grandiose magical effect, but with the disturbing, quiet absorption of a cultist's lifeblood into the doll's porcelain. A silent pact that transforms an object of innocence into a dedicated instrument of torment. This act serves as the irrevocable inciting incident, tethering a formless demonic presence to the tangible world through a child's toy. Relocation, a classic horror trope for seeking respite, is expertly deployed to amplify the character's helplessness. The move to the Pasadena apartment symbolizes a futile attempt to outrun a threat that is metaphysically, not geographically, attached. The doll's inexplicable reappearance among their boxes is a devastating blow, signaling that the evil they face is an intelligent predator, not a residual haunting tied to a location. This realization marks the true beginning of their ordeal, confining them within a new architectural space that will become a gilded cage for Mia's escalating psychological torment. The haunting methodology exhibits a cruel, predatory intelligence designed to systematically isolate its prey. Paranormal events are not random, but surgically targeted to erode Mia's connection to reality and to her support systems. Phenomena often center around the nursery and infant Leah, exploiting the most primal of maternal fears to generate maximum psychological distress. This strategic focus transforms the apartment from a sanctuary into a labyrinth of dread where every mundane object and routine becomes a potential trigger for supernatural aggression. Father Perez functions as more than a simple expositional device. He represents the limited power of institutional faith against this specific evil. His role is diagnostician, not exorcist. He can name the demonic force and explain its rules of engagement, its need for a conduit and a soul, but his traditional tools are rendered inadequate. This narrative choice cleverly elevates the threat level, suggesting a malignancy so virulent it exists beyond the standard remedies of the Church, forcing a resolution that must be more personal and costly. Evelyn's narrative arc provides the film's crucial emotional and thematic counterweight to the demon's nihilism. Her profound grief, stemming from the accidental loss of her own daughter, is portrayed with a quiet dignity that resonates deeply. She does not merely assist the forms. She sees in their struggle a reflection of her own tragedy and a possible path to redemption. Her ultimate sacrifice is therefore not a sudden heroic impulse, but the culmination of a long journey with guilt, reframing her final act as a chosen atonement and a transfer of protective love. The film's visual language is one of corrupted domesticity, where the color palette itself seems to leach of warmth as the haunting progresses. Early scenes are bathed in soft, golden hues that evoke safety and nostalgia. As the entity tightens its grip, these tones are supplanted by colder blues and grays, and shadows grow longer and more pronounced within the apartment's layout. The cinematography frequently employs tight, restrictive framing on Mia, visually manifesting her feeling of being trapped, observed, and suffocated within her own home. Sound design operates as a relentless psychological weapon, crafting an aural environment of pervasive unease. Beyond the requisite loud stings, the track is layered with insidious ambient sounds. The faint, discordant tinkle of the nursery mobile, the ambiguous scratch of something unseen in the walls, the oppressive silence of an apartment holding its breath. This sophisticated auditory landscape keeps the viewer in a state of hypervigilance, mirroring Mia's fractured psyche and making the domestic space feel alive with malignant awareness. A significant creative success lies in the portrayal of the doll as a passive-aggressive antagonist. Its power is entirely rooted in its static, inscrutable presence. The filmmakers wisely avoid animating it, understanding that an audience's imagined terror far surpasses any physical movement. The horror derives from its silent appearances in unexpected places, on a bed, in a chair, its glassy gaze implying an omnipresent witness to the family's disintegration. This makes it a uniquely modern icon, terrifying in its inert complicity. The film's midpoint features a masterclass in suspense set within the apartment building's basement laundry room. This sequence abandons the broad jump-scare tactic for a meticulously crafted exercise in claustrophobia and mounting dread. The malfunctioning elevator, the flickering lights, and the labyrinthine rows of storage units create a visceral sense of entrapment. The editing here is precise, using prolonged silences and restricted perspectives to make the audience lean in, only to deliver a scare that feels earned by the exquisite tension, not manufactured by a sound cue. Critical dismissal often centered on the film's perceived lack of originality, labeling it a schematic copy of James Wan's previous works. Indeed, the narrative architecture, traumatic inciting event, failed relocation, skeptical spouse, paranormal experts, is undeniably familiar. This derivativeness, however, can be reinterpreted as a deliberate adherence to a proven, audience-pleasing formula. The film operates not as an innovator, but as a proficient practitioner of a specific school of mainstream, atmosphere-driven supernatural horror. The chasm between critical and audience response highlights a fundamental divide in horror consumption values. For many critics seeking narrative innovation or deep character study, the film fell short. For a massive segment of the movie-going public, the primary criteria were met: the creation of a consistently eerie mood, the deployment of effectively timed scares, and the solidification of a creepy new icon. The record-shattering box office proved that for this audience, execution of a familiar premise was preferable to risky innovation. The late 1960s, early 1970s setting is not mere aesthetic decoration, but a vital component of the film's subtext. Released in the shadow of the Manson family murders and a rising cultural fascination with cults, the opening invasion taps directly into a contemporary, media-fueled anxiety. This grounds the supernatural premise in a very real, period-specific fear of chaotic, motiveless violence infiltrating the suburban home, making the initial demonic summoning feel like a plausible extension of the era's darkest societal currents. Mia's journey, while archetypal, charts a compelling evolution from vulnerable victim to ferociously protective mother. Her initial fright and isolation gradually harden into a steely resolve. This transformation peaks in the climax, where her love for Leah becomes her spiritual armor and her motivating force, directly opposing the demon's soul-consuming hunger. This arc roots the extravagant supernatural conflict in a universally recognizable human instinct, granting the horror its essential emotional stakes. The demon itself is characterized by a terrifying, impersonal functionality. It is less a mustache-twirling villain and more a predatory organism following its base programming. Secure a conduit, claim a soul. This lack of personality or motive makes it more frightening. It is a force of spiritual entropy, indifferent to its victims beyond their utility. Its evil is procedural, which makes its relentless pursuit feel inevitable and inescapable, a stark contrast to antagonists driven by revenge or specific malice. The film's production design meticulously builds a world that feels authentically lived in and period accurate. From the patterns of the wallpaper to the models of the cars, the environment avoids nostalgic kitsch. This tangible realism makes the intrusion of the supernatural more violently disruptive, as it violates a world that looks and feels genuinely solid. The authenticity of the setting acts as a counterweight to the fantastical elements, tethering them to a believable reality. Annabelle's influence extended beyond the screen, affecting the cultural perception of its real-world inspiration. The actual Annabelle doll, as reported by the Warrens, is a simple Raggedy Ann doll. The film's redesign into a haunting porcelain figure with a vacant stare was a masterstroke of cinematic license, creating a far more visually potent and marketable icon. This decision demonstrates the film's understanding of visual storytelling, opting for an image that would sear itself into the public consciousness. The relationship between Mia and Evelyn transcends a typical victim-helper dynamic, evolving into a profound, wordless understanding. They are linked by a shared, unspoken language of maternal love and loss. Evelyn sees in Mia the chance to correct a past failure, while Mia finds in Evelyn the unwavering belief and guidance her husband cannot initially offer. This deep connection is the emotional engine that makes Evelyn's sacrifice feel tragically inevitable rather than merely plot convenient. The film's editing employs a patient, deliberate rhythm that builds anxiety through duration. Rather than frenetic cutting, it often holds on static shots of empty doorways, silent hallways, or the doll itself, forcing the audience to sit with their own anticipation. This technique demonstrates a confidence in the power of the created atmosphere and the central creepy image, making the moments when something does happen land with greater impact. The concept of the conduit, as established here, became a cornerstone of the Conjuring Universe's internal logic. It provided a reproducible supernatural mechanic, a haunted artifact that serves as both anchor and amplifier for evil. This rule-based approach allowed future films to explore different objects, a music box, a wedding dress, a demonic nun's likeness, while maintaining a consistent mythological framework, giving the sprawling franchise a cohesive internal consistency. John Form's character, often criticized as underwritten, can be viewed as a deliberate representation of rational, empirical thought colliding with the irrational. His profession as a doctor symbolizes a worldview based on observable evidence and logical cause and effect. His gradual, reluctant acceptance of the supernatural mirrors the audience's own journey, and his eventual commitment to the fight, while late, provides a crucial alliance of logic and faith in the finale. The film's score by Joseph Bishara is an integral character, a sonic representation of the demon's presence. Composed of droning cellos, shrieking violins, and atonal pulses, it doesn't merely accompany the action. It is the action in auditory form. The music feels invasive and wrong, sonically mirroring the corruption of the domestic space. Its recurring motifs create an auditory signature for the franchise, instantly signaling a particular brand of orchestral dread. The final act's resolution hinges on a spiritual trade, a theme of substitution that has deep roots in religious and folk horror traditions. Evelyn's offer of her own soul in place of Mia's is not a loophole, but a profound expression of love that operates within the demon's own stated rules. This provides a thematically coherent, if somber, conclusion, arguing that the only currency powerful enough to buy back a soul from such evil is another soul, willingly given. The coda, linking directly to The Conjuring, is a stroke of genius in franchise architecture. It transforms the film from a closed-loop prequel into an essential, impactful chapter in an ongoing saga. The brief glimpse of the Warrens' artifact room recontextualizes the entire story as a case file, giving the form suffering a lasting legacy and purpose within a larger battle against the occult. It validates the film's existence by making it a key link in a narrative chain. Annabelle's legacy is cemented not by its reviews, but by its catalytic function. It was the proof of concept that a shared horror universe could be built profitably from the ground up, focusing on artifacts rather than just characters. Its financial triumph directly enabled more ambitious, better-received sequels and spin-offs, effectively bankrolling the expansion of the entire cinematic world. It stands as the commercially essential, if artistically modest, foundation upon which a more elaborate house of horrors was built. The film's approach to violence is largely suggestive, aligning with its PG-13 rating and broad audience strategy. The horror is generated through anticipation, implication, and psychological torment rather than graphic viscera. This choice broadened its commercial appeal significantly, attracting younger viewers and those averse to gore, while proving that intense, effective fear could be manufactured through atmosphere and sound design as potently as through explicit imagery. Mia's investigation into the doll's history represents her reclaiming of agency. Her trips to libraries and antique shops mark her transition from a passive recipient of terror to an active seeker of knowledge. This process allows the film to organically dispense exposition while charting her growing comprehension of the ancient, impersonal evil she faces, making her eventual confrontation one of informed defiance rather than blind panic. The recurring visual motif of blood on white surfaces, porcelain, fabric, wallpaper, is a powerful symbol of indelible corruption. It represents the permanent stain of the initial violent act, a reminder that some traumas cannot be washed away and instead become portals for further darkness. This imagery connects the opening ritual to every subsequent event, visually arguing that the demon's presence is a spiritual infection spreading from that original point of contact. The apartment building itself serves as a brilliant modern horror setting, embodying urban alienation. It is a space of proximate neighbors whose lives are audibly close yet entirely separate, a perfect metaphor for Mia's psychological isolation. The hauntings exploit this architecture, with sounds seeming to come from other units and threats lurking in communal spaces, turning a symbol of community into a landscape of solitary terror. The film's marketing genius lay in its minimalist focus on the doll's face. Posters and trailers featured little else, understanding that the image alone was the concept. This campaign tapped directly into a widespread pre-existing cultural unease surrounding dolls, the uncanny valley of their frozen expressions, and amplified it into a marketable brand. It was a masterclass in selling a mood and an icon over a complicated plot. From a directorial standpoint, John R. Leonetti's background in cinematography is evident in every carefully composed shot. The film is visually assured, using depth of field, focus pulls, and strategic lighting to guide the viewer's eye and create unease. While the narrative direction may lack bold innovation, the technical direction is proficient and polished, resulting in a product that is always professionally crafted and visually coherent. The portrayal of the satanic cult is deliberately fleeting, a narrative device to unleash the evil rather than an ongoing antagonist. This choice is significant. It divorces the supernatural force from its human summoners, suggesting that once unleashed, such entities operate with their own agency and purpose. The real horror, therefore, is not the cult's beliefs, but the independent, predatory force they inadvertently release into the world. The film's pacing demonstrates a confident understanding of genre rhythm, acting as a metronome for fear. It expertly modulates between quiet, character-focused scenes of building paranoia and intense, set-piece scares. This rhythmic control prevents numbness and allows tension to rebuild systematically, taking the audience on a carefully calibrated roller coaster of anticipation and release. Annabelle's character design is a triumph of implied narrative. The doll's Victorian-style dress, cracked porcelain, and vacant, painted eyes suggest a history of false innocence and concealed damage. Its very aesthetic whispers of a bygone era's repressed secrets, making it a perfect vessel for an ancient evil. The design communicates volumes without a single line of dialogue, becoming a storytelling object in itself. The film's philosophical stance is one of supernatural realism, presenting the demonic as a factual, if rare, component of reality. It operates less like a fairy tale and more like a supernatural thriller, establishing rules and following them with a grim consistency. This grounds the extravagance in a pseudo-logical framework, making the events feel more plausible and therefore more threatening to a modern, skeptical audience. The costume design performs subtle character work, particularly for Mia. Her wardrobe evolves from cheerful, patterned dresses emblematic of the era's optimism to increasingly plain, practical, and often disheveled clothing. This visual arc externalizes her internal unraveling, charting her journey from a vibrant, expectant mother to an exhausted, terrorized woman fighting for her family's survival. The film's use of children's paraphernalia as vectors for fear is particularly insidious. A rocking chair, a mobile, a nursery rhyme. Each symbol of comfort and safety is systematically poisoned by association. This method attacks the very heart of domestic security, suggesting that the tools of love and nurturing can be perverted into instruments of terror, a concept far more unsettling than any generic ghoul. In the taxonomy of haunted object stories, Annabelle distinguishes itself by the sheer banality of its central artifact. Unlike cursed jewels or ancient relics, a doll is a common, mass-produced item found in millions of homes. This normalcy is the source of its power. The film suggests that evil does not need a grand vessel, that it can infiltrate the most mundane aspects of daily life and turn them against us. The final image in the Warrens Museum provides no catharsis, only eerie containment. The doll, seated on a shelf alongside other cursed items, is not destroyed. Its evil is merely catalogued and quarantined, a sleeping threat awaiting the next opportunity. This ending perfectly encapsulates the franchise's overarching theme: that evil is a permanent, if often contained, feature of the world, requiring eternal vigilance rather than final victory. The film's enduring cultural footprint is evidenced by the doll's status as a Halloween staple and a pop culture reference point. It transcended its cinematic origins to become a shorthand for creepy dolls in general. This demonstrates the power of a simple, potent visual idea executed with enough skill to capture the public imagination, regardless of critical caveats about narrative depth or originality. Ultimately, Annabelle, 2014, is best understood as a supremely effective piece of horror engineering. It identified a potent fear, corrupted innocence, procured a perfect visual symbol, the doll, placed it in a relatable context, suburban family life, and assembled it all with high-grade technical craft. While it may lack the artistic ambition or deep psychological complexity of genre masterpieces, it fulfills its core mandate with ruthless efficiency. Its true horror lies not just in its scares, but in its demonstration of a flawless, replicable formula for box office success in the modern horror landscape. The film's opening act deliberately lulls the audience into a state of nostalgic comfort, meticulously recreating the aesthetic textures of early 1970s suburbia. This carefully constructed normalcy is not merely set dressing, but a necessary foundation for the profound violation to come. The audience is invited to inhabit a space of hopeful anticipation alongside the protagonists, making the ensuing rupture feel personally invasive rather than abstractly scary. This establishment of a believable, warm domestic sphere is a calculated narrative strategy to maximize the impact of its desecration. Mia's profession as a seamstress, often overlooked, serves as a subtle but potent symbol throughout the narrative. Her creative act of constructing and mending fabrics becomes ironically juxtaposed with the demon's work of unraveling her reality. In one key scene, her sewing machine operates on its own, perverting her tool of creation into an instrument of autonomous menace. This thematic thread ties into a larger exploration of corrupted domesticity, where every facet of homemaking is twisted into a potential threat against the homemaker herself. The demonic entity's manifestation strategy reveals a sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare rather than brute force. It employs a tactic of gradual escalation, beginning with subtle, deniable phenomena, a misplaced doll, a faint noise, that strategically gaslights Mia and isolates her from John's rational worldview. This slow-burn approach allows doubt to fester, weakening the familial bond that could provide a unified defense and making Mia a more vulnerable, singular target for the entity's ultimate objective. John Form's characterization, while frequently critiqued as flat, can be interpreted as a deliberate archetype representing the limitations of secular, empirical thought. His medical background, a profession dedicated to diagnosing and curing physical ailments, renders him intellectually unequipped to comprehend a metaphysical malignancy. His initial skepticism is not just spousal neglect, but a fundamental cognitive dissonance, a worldview crashing against an incompatible reality. His eventual acceptance is therefore a tragic awakening, arriving only after the paradigm shift has cost them dearly. The geographical and architectural journey from a standalone suburban home to an urban apartment building is a critical shift in the nature of the horror. The first home represented a penetrable sanctuary, its violation coming from outside invaders. The apartment, however, becomes a claustrophobic prison where the threat is already inside, woven into the very fabric of their new beginning. This transition moves the horror from external invasion to internal infestation, a more intimate and inescapable form of terror. Evelyn's bookstore is not just a location, but a symbolic repository of knowledge and potentially solace. Its warm, dusty confines, filled with silent stories, stand in stark contrast to the cold, sterile modernity of the Form's apartment. Her character offers an alternative model of living with grief, not through frantic escape or rational denial, but through a quiet, enduring communion with memory and the past. This makes her sacrifice a culmination of her philosophy, an active engagement with loss to spare others. The film's color theory is applied with purposeful intent, charting the emotional and spiritual decay of the family's world. The initial palette is dominated by warm creams, sunny yellows, and earthy browns, evoking a wholesome, organic safety. As the haunting progresses, these are infiltrated and supplanted by cooler, sicklier greens, grays, and the harsh white of the doll's porcelain. This visual cooling mirrors the draining of life and joy from the environment, a chromatic representation of the demon's soul-chilling presence. Auditory motifs extend beyond scare cues to become identifiers of the entity's proximity and intent. The specific mechanical whir of the sewing machine, the distinct creak of the rocking chair, and the tinkling melody of the baby mobile become auditory trademarks of the demon's activity. These sounds, initially associated with domestic comfort, are weaponized, creating a conditioned fear response in both Mia and the audience whenever they are heard, illustrating the corruption of the familiar. The doll's design intentionally evokes the frozen Charlotte type of porcelain doll, historically known for their rigid, unchanging expressions. This choice is genius, as it plays on the uncanny valley effect inherent in dolls that mimic human features but lack life. Its permanent, faint smile becomes a mask of mockery, a silent witness that conveys neither empathy nor malice, only an eerie, implacable presence that suggests a vast, incomprehensible intelligence behind its glass eyes. A profound layer of the film explores the commodification of evil and the collector's impulse. John purchases the doll because it is rare and complete, an object of aesthetic and historical value. The cult seeks it as a ritual object, a tool for transcendence. The Warrens will later acquire it as a dangerous artifact, a specimen for study. The doll, therefore, transitions through different systems of value: monetary, spiritual, academic. But its core function as a vessel for predation remains constant, critiquing the vanity of believing such forces can be owned or controlled. The theme of failed sanctuary is reinforced through the ineffectiveness of traditional institutions. The police offer no protection from a supernatural stalker. The church, in the form of Father Perez, can diagnose but not cure the affliction. The medical establishment, symbolized by John, cannot treat the symptoms. This systemic failure forces the conflict into a personal, spiritual realm where institutional authority holds no sway, raising the stakes by making the family truly alone in their battle. Mia's moments of investigation represent a crucial reclamation of agency in the face of overwhelming helplessness. Her research into the doll's history and her pursuit of Evelyn are active choices, movements toward understanding and alliance. This proactive shift is vital for the audience's empathy. She transforms from a passive screamer into a determined investigator, aligning her will against the demons and setting the stage for a conflict of wills, not just a series of traumatic events. The demon's targeting of Leah is a tactical maneuver of exquisite cruelty, but also a potential narrative vulnerability. By focusing on the infant, it ensures Mia's attention and emotional investment are fully engaged, keeping her within its strategic orbit. However, this focus also roots the demon's actions in the physical world, tethering its spiritual goal to a tangible, protectable life. This tether ultimately provides the linchpin for its defeat, as the power of maternal love becomes a force it underestimated. The cinematography frequently employs the visual language of surveillance and entrapment. High-angle shots look down on Mia, making her appear small and dominated. Reflections in mirrors and windows often catch glimpses of the doll or shadowy figures, suggesting a world where the unseen observer is always present. The framing within doorways and hallways creates a sense of being watched from a threshold, emphasizing the porous boundary between safe space and invaded space. The film's treatment of the occult is notably non-sensationalized. The satanic cult is not depicted with Gothic theatrics, but as a grim, nihilistic group reflecting the real-world anxieties of the era. Their ritual is blunt and bloody, lacking magical spectacle. This grounding in a grimy reality makes the supernatural result, the haunted doll, more credible. The evil feels earned, a consequence of human action rather than a whimsical fantasy, adhering to a cause-and-effect logic within its own rules. Evelyn's backstory is conveyed with remarkable economy, relying on Alfred Woodard's nuanced performance and sparse dialogue. The weight of her loss is carried in her posture, her hesitant speech, and the careful way she handles objects in her shop. This subtlety makes her final act feel not like a scripted sacrifice, but the inevitable culmination of a life already shaped by a profound, enduring love turned to grief. Her arc argues that the greatest courage can be born from the deepest sorrow. The recurring motif of blood serves as a literal and symbolic stain, connecting the violence of the cult to the psychological violence inflicted on the forms. It is the physical agent of the doll's transformation, the shocking visual punctuation in several scare scenes, and a symbolic representation of life force under attack. Its vivid color against the muted backgrounds is a visual scream, a reminder of the visceral, bodily terror underpinning the spiritual crisis. The film's pacing is architectural, constructing a house of horrors brick by brick. It avoids the frenetic, disorienting pace of some modern horror, instead building sequences with a classical sense of rising action. Scares are often preceded by elongated moments of quiet dread, allowing anticipation to coil tightly in the viewer's stomach. This classical structure provides a reliable, if familiar, rhythm that audiences can follow, making the terrifying peaks feel earned through narrative exertion. Annabelle's presence in the nursery is a masterful perversion of the domestic sphere's heart. The nursery is a space curated for innocence, safety, and future promise. The doll's placement there is an act of profound symbolic violence, a direct injection of ancient malice into the epicenter of new life. It transforms a room of pastel colors and soft fabrics into a chamber of silent threat, where the very objects meant to comfort a child become ominous portents. The film's soundscape during quiet moments is not true silence, but a dense layer of ambient environmental noise. The hum of appliances, distant traffic, the settling of the building. This living silence makes the insertion of unnatural sounds, a faint giggle, a dragged footstep, all the more jarring. It creates an aural environment where the line between normal and paranormal is blurred, keeping the audience in a state of sustained, low-grade anxiety. Father Perez's role, while expositional, introduces the crucial concept of spiritual jurisdiction and limitation. His explanation that demons often use objects as conduits establishes a rule set, but his subsequent vulnerability demonstrates that knowledge alone is insufficient armor. His character embodies the film's thesis that facing such evil requires a personal, costly engagement beyond theological understanding or clerical authority. The elevator sequence is a self-contained masterpiece of suspense because it isolates Mia from all domestic context. Stripped of her home, her family, and her familiar triggers, she is trapped in a sterile, mechanical space. The horror here is purely existential and physical. The fear of a mechanical failure, the darkness of a confined shaft. By temporarily abandoning the supernatural for this tangible threat, the film amplifies Mia's vulnerability before reintroducing the demonic, making both forms of terror feel more potent. The costume design for Mia performs a subtle narrative function. Her clothing gradually shifts from the cheerful, patterned fabrics of a 1970s homemaker to simpler, often monochromatic, and more practical attire. This visual progression externalizes her journey from a defined social role, the expectant mother, to a primal state of survivalist protector. The costumes strip away period-specific identity to reveal a universal archetype, the mother in defense mode. The demon's lack of a personal vendetta or history with the forms is key to its terror. It is an opportunistic predator. They are not chosen for past sins or family curses. They are simply vulnerable and proximate to a suitable conduit. This randomness makes the horror more relatable and frightening. It suggests that catastrophic evil can attach itself to any life, given the wrong set of mundane circumstances, removing the comfort of narrative destiny or earned retribution. The film's finale, set during a power blackout, is a symbolic stripping away of modernity's defenses. Electricity, the lifeblood of the contemporary home, fails, plunging the family back into a primal state of darkness. This forces the conflict into its most essential terms: love versus consumption, sacrifice versus predation. The artificial lights of the modern world are extinguished, leaving only the fundamental spiritual struggle illuminated by flashlight beams and desperation. The act of Evelyn's sacrifice is framed not as a suicide, but as a deliberate, conscious trade. She articulates her choice, offering her soul in exchange for Mia's. This transaction operates within the demon's established rules. It wants a soul, but subverts its intent by providing one offered willingly, with love, rather than one taken through terror. This introduces a moral and spiritual complexity, suggesting that the currency of souls may have different values based on the conditions of their exchange. The coda in the antique shop is a chilling commentary on the circulation of haunted objects in a capitalist society. The doll is just another commodity on a shelf, its horrific history unknown to the browsing couple. This scene suggests that such evils are constantly moving through the channels of ordinary life, disguised by aesthetics and price tags, waiting for an unsuspecting buyer to provide a new gateway. It extends the horror beyond one family's story to a systemic, societal vulnerability. Annabelle's success fundamentally altered the economics of horror franchise building. It proved that a shared universe did not require A-list stars or monumental budgets, but could be built on compelling lore, strong iconography, and efficient, scalable production models. Its profit margin became a blueprint, encouraging studios to mine existing horror properties for artifact stories that could be produced reliably and marketed on the strength of a single, potent image. The film's philosophical underpinning is a pessimistic view of evil as a latent force in the universe, requiring only a catalyst, like a violent act focused through a symbolic object, to become active. This is a more ancient, Manichaean view of evil as an active principle, contrasting with modern psychological horror, where evil emerges from human trauma or pathology. Here, humanity is not the source, but often the unwitting conduit for a pre-existing external corruption. Mia's relationship with the doll evolves through distinct phases. Initial aesthetic appreciation, post-trauma fear, investigative curiosity, and finally, furious defiance. This evolution mirrors the audience's journey with the icon. She never achieves mastery over it, but her relationship to it changes, defining her own strength not by destroying the evil, but by surviving it and protecting what she loves from its grasp, a more relatable and human victory. The use of children's rhymes and lullabies as auditory cues is particularly insidious. These sounds are hardwired into the human brain as signals of safety and comfort. By associating these melodies with the doll's presence or the demon's activity, the film performs a profound auditory corruption. It severs the neural link between those sounds and safety, making them triggers for dread, a psychological manipulation that lingers beyond the film's runtime. John's profession as a surgeon is a metaphor with double edges. It suggests a man who fixes broken things, yet he is powerless to fix the metaphysical rupture in his home. Conversely, in the climax, his skills of precision and calm under pressure become assets, demonstrating that his rationality, once aligned with belief, can be a tool in the fight. His character arc is ultimately about integrating his empirical worldview with a new, terrifying reality, finding a way to operate within it. The film's lighting in the apartment complex hallway scenes is a study in creating unease through the mundane. The long, repeating perspectives, lit by sconces that create pools of light and deep shadow, turn ordinary architecture into an expressionist nightmare. These are spaces one walks daily without thought, but through cinematic framing, they become endless, liminal zones where anything could be waiting just outside the cone of light. Annabelle's influence is evident in how it made static, inanimate objects central to horror again. In an era dominated by fast-moving ghosts and physical monsters, it returned to a slower, more atmospheric fear of the object itself. It reminded audiences that the power of suggestion, the fear of what an object represents or contains, can be more enduringly frightening than any explicit monster makeup or digital effect. The movie's resolution provides closure for the forms, but not for the doll. This asymmetry is crucial. The family's story ends with hard-won safety, but the artifact's story continues. This narrative structure validates the family's trauma as a significant chapter, but acknowledges they were encounters in a much longer, ongoing history of the object's malign journey. It gives weight to their suffering while expanding the mythology beyond them. In the context of the Conjuring Universe, Annabelle functions as the essential case file that establishes the haunted artifact classification. While the Warrens battle spirits attached to people or places, this film provides the precedent for objects that are themselves mobile, self-contained haunting engines. It adds a crucial category to their occult taxonomy, justifying the need for a special room to contain such volatile, non-biologically tethered evils. The film's marketing brilliantly leveraged the universal creepiness of dolls without revealing the mechanics of the plot. Trailers focused on the doll's face in darkness, its sudden appearances, and the reactions of the actors. This sold the experience of fear, the jump, the dread, rather than the story, appealing directly to the visceral audience desire for a scary movie experience, which the film delivered with proficient, if not revolutionary, skill. Ultimately, Annabelle is a film about thresholds between the mundane and the supernatural, safety and violation, sanity and madness, life and death. The doll itself is a threshold object, a doorstop between worlds. The film's terror is generated by the relentless violation of these boundaries. Evil crosses into the home, the past infects the present, and a mother's love must cross into the realm of sacrifice to seal the breach. Its enduring power lies in its foundational, almost elemental, mapping of these terrifying border crossings. The initial presentation of the doll as a coveted collectible cleverly critiques a materialistic worldview blind to spiritual danger. John's purchase prioritizes rarity and aesthetic completeness, valuing the object within a system of monetary and historical appreciation that is utterly irrelevant to its true function. This disconnect between perceived and actual value becomes a central irony, as the family's taste and comfortable socioeconomic status provide no defense against, and even facilitate, the intrusion of an archaic evil. The film suggests that modern consumerism, with its focus on surface and provenance, is ill-equipped to perceive or comprehend the older, darker histories that objects can carry. Mia's isolation is not merely physical but epistemological, stemming from the impossibility of conveying her subjective terror within the rational frameworks available to her. Her experiences exist in a realm of personal sensation and mounting dread that language fails to capture, especially to a husband trained to trust empirical evidence. This communicative breakdown is a classic horror trope rendered here with specific resonance to gender dynamics of the era, where a woman's escalating distress could be easily pathologized as hysteria. Her battle is thus twofold, against the demon and against the pervasive doubt that invalidates her reality, making her alliance with Evelyn, a believer without needing evidence, so vitally affirming. The demon's manipulation of time and memory within the apartment adds a layer of existential dread to the physical threats. By reappearing exactly as it was discarded, the doll defies linear causality, creating a terrifying loop the family cannot escape. Moments of peace are revealed to be mere interludes, not progress, as the past trauma physically remanifests. This warping of time makes their new beginning a futile concept, trapping them in a recurring present where the haunting is the only constant. The apartment becomes a temporal prison as much as a spatial one, where forward movement is an illusion and the nightmare is always poised to reset. Father Perez's defeat is a pivotal narrative choice that reinforces the film's specific stakes. His faith is genuine, his knowledge is accurate, yet he is physically overwhelmed, ending up hospitalized and terrified. This consequence serves a crucial purpose. It demonstrates that this entity cannot be defeated by ritualistic authority or holy symbols alone. His failure raises the stakes exponentially for the forms, proving that the standard solutions are inadequate and that the resolution must be far more personal and costly. It shifts the conflict from a clerical matter to a primal familial one, where the weapons are not sacramentals but sacrifice and raw protective love. The film's production design uses texture to subconsciously amplify unease, contrasting the soft, inviting textures of the initial home with the harder, colder surfaces of the apartment. Plush carpets give way to polished floors. Warm wood paneling is replaced by slick paint and glass. This tactile shift makes the new environment feel less absorbent, more reflective and echoic, a space where sounds bounce and shadows are sharper. The domestic warmth is literally stripped away, leaving an interior that feels clinical and impersonal, a blank canvas ideally suited for the projection of fear and the stark, cold presence of the porcelain doll. Evelyn's sacrifice operates within a distinct economy of spiritual debt and redemption. Her life, shadowed by accidental loss, is framed as one carrying a burden of unresolved grief and unspent maternal protection. By consciously offering her soul, she transforms this burden into a currency powerful enough to transact with the demon. Her act is not one of despair but of agency. The ultimate use of her will to settle a perceived debt from her past by purchasing a future for Mia and Leah. This provides a tragic but coherent logic to the climax, where love and guilt are fused into a singular, potent force that the purely predatory demon cannot refuse, but fails to truly comprehend. The pervasive use of framing devices within the mise-en-scene, windows, doorways, archways, the frames of pictures, continually presents the horror as a composed image, a painting or a snapshot. This technique subtly distances the viewer even as it terrifies, creating a chilling sense of aestheticized malevolence. It suggests the demon's influence is not just chaotic but also deliberate, arranging tableaus of terror for its own inscrutable purposes or for Mia's consumption. The horror feels staged, implying an intelligence that views the family's suffering as a perverse form of art or communication, adding a layer of cruel intentionality to the scares. The film's avoidance of a traditional exorcism ritual is thematically significant. An exorcism would imply the demon's primary attachment is to a person, a soul it must be driven from. Here, the primary attachment is to the object, the conduit. The human soul is the target, but the battleground is the domestic space around the doll. Therefore, the solution cannot be a clerical rite performed on a person, but a spiritual maneuver that addresses the terms of the demon's own engagement, its claim on a soul via the object. The climax is thus a twisted negotiation and substitution, not a ceremonial expulsion. Adhering meticulously to the internal logic the film established, Annabelle's status as a prequel forces a narrative irony that shapes the entire viewing experience. The audience possesses foreknowledge of the doll's future, understanding it is an infamous artifact destined for a museum of the occult. This knowledge transforms the form's struggle from a fight for absolute victory into a fight for survival and containment. We watch not to see if the doll is neutralized, but to see what price must be paid to temporarily remove it from circulation and how it survives to reach its infamous destiny. This shifts the dramatic tension from what to how and at what cost, framing the film as an elaborate tragic origin story for a known horror relic. The film's final legacy lies in its successful alchemy of a simple, universal phobia into a durable narrative engine. It took the innate eeriness of dolls, their static gaze, their mimicry of life, and provided a potent mythological explanation for it within a modern cinematic universe. In doing so, Annabelle accomplished the rare feat of making a film that is, in many critical respects, conventional, yet whose central icon became unconventionally powerful, ensuring its place not just as a movie, but as a persistent node in popular culture. Its true horror may be its demonstration of how effectively a well-designed concept, executed with professional craft, can bypass critical appraisal to embed itself directly into the contemporary audience's subconscious. The end.